Haha, I thought I can get it done with two videos, but couldn't, but only just a few more things to talk about in this video. Okay, so building your medical vocabulary in the book, there's a whole chart, and I do want you to know those words, okay? Now, what I love is they split the word into its parts. And if you look at it, you're like, now that's making sense. So, android, you've heard of that word before. It's like, what does that mean? So, the prefix, oops, let me get this going. The prefix and, right, talking about man, oid, resemble. So, android, resembling man. Chromosome, you've heard about that. Chromo, color, some, body. Internal, right? What are we talking about? Intern, within, all pertaining to. And lastly, physiology. Physiology doesn't make much sense. Physio means nature, right? And ology is the study of, okay? So when you're breaking the words apart, like try to do that. Look at the roots, the prefixes, suffixes to try to figure out what those words are saying. And again, once you get those down, it's going to be easier. Okay. Oh, unilateral. Uni means one. Lat means side. Okay. All pertaining to unilateral. So it's on one side. Now, lastly, in this chapter, drug highlights. What's a drug, right? A substance that can alter or modify functions. Think of this. I want to use this. So it says thousands of drugs are available. OTC, you do need to know that, over the counter. So think of like ibuprofen or Tylenol or Aleve, right? So what's what? What's ibuprofen and what's Aleve and what's Tylenol and, so there are thousands of over-the-counter drugs, and then, of course, there are drugs that need a prescription. So what are the jobs of drugs? Okay, it says there are 5 medical uses: therapeutic, diagnostic, curative, replacement, preventative. Okay, so therapeutic, drugs used in treatment of a disease or condition to relieve symptoms or sustain the patient. So think of someone who has like chronic arthritis. They might be taking anti-inflammatories to help them deal with this. So it's therapeutic. Diagnostic, it says certain drugs are used in conjunction with radiology to allow the physician to pinpoint location. So I hope no one's ever had to do this. Is it barium? If they're trying to do an internal x-ray and you have to drink this stuff, that's pretty nasty. But they make you drink it so they can see the intestines, right? Curative, kill or remove the causative agent. There's a lot of curative drugs, right? Whether it's topical, whether it's internal, replacement or supplement. Okay, so if you've ever heard of people like having to take thyroid medication, because for whatever reason the thyroid gland's not making that hormone, so there's hormone replacement medication. Preventative or prophylactic, ward off or lessen the severity of the disease, so we can have medications for that. So there's different types of medications that do different things. They have different jobs. Okay. Now, the name, the reason I said ibuprofen, well, what is ibuprofen, right? Would that be the chemical, the generic, or the trade? Right? So probably the generic, right? Chemical, usually the formula, right? So that's going to be pretty complicated saying what's in it. Trade name, maybe Aleve would be the trade name. And usually the trade name is what comes up first. And after a period of time, then they can make generic drugs, where it's the same. Chemically, it's the same stuff. But doesn't have that name brand, so it's going to be cheaper. But there was stuff, in the news about generic drugs, and some of them are not very safe, like depending on where they're made, what countries they're made in, and what kind of, what's the word, testing, or what kind of supervision they have. So some of the generic drugs have had issues. Okay. Undesirable actions, you've heard of that. You've heard of side effects, right? So imagine, let's go back to ibuprofen. I love ibuprofen because it helps me. If you have muscle pain, it can help for that. For me, if I have headaches, it can help for that. But are there any side effects? Yes. Sometimes they'll say, take with food, right? You got to be careful. You listen to what they say because if you take it, it can cause ulcers. It can cause bleeding. So most drugs have the potential for causing an action other than the intended action. This type of reaction is called undesirable drug reaction or side effect, right? Antibiotic causing gastric discomfort. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this. I hope you haven't. But if you take antibiotics, sometimes that goes hand in hand with, you take antibiotics, because let's say you have an ear infection, you take antibiotics, but then that can cause diarrhea, right? It's not intended. That's not why you're taking the antibiotics, but that's a side effect. So in the media, when you hear about all these drug advertisements, and then they have to say the side effects, right? Adverse reaction, unfavorable or harmful unintended action of a drug. So sometimes, for example, antibiotics are great drugs, but they can cause adverse reactions, right? Drug interactions. If you're taking one drug and you're taking another drug, can the two drugs interact with one another? It can occur when one drug potentiates, increases the action, or diminishes the action of another drug. So drugs can also interact with foods, alcohol, tobacco, other substances. So, if you've ever taken a medication, right, and it says, do not drink, right? Do not use alcohol. There's a reason why they say that, okay? The one drug may intensify the effects of alcohol. Or of course, when they say don't drive, etc., because it's going to affect the nervous system and they don't want you groggy, more potential to get into an accident, right? If it affects the nervous system. Medication order, yes, right? So if it says, you guys are familiar with this, right? Given for a specific patient denotes the name of the drug, dosage, form drug, So we're talking about the order. Now, lastly, in this chapter, abbreviations. I do want you to be familiar with them. They shouldn't be that difficult. ABD, abdominal, ANP, anatomy, physiology, BMI, body mass index, BP, blood pressure, CO2, carbon dioxide, DNA, ER, FDA. So yeah, these are things that you will run into, okay, if you're going into the medical field. And then lastly, there's a little quiz. All right, so we are done with chapter 4. Again, I didn't do videos for chapters 1, 2, 3 because they were pretty self-explanatory. There was a lot of just vocabulary, right? Just a lot of memorization. So I truly do apologize for the memorization. I do want you, again, it's drill and kill again. But try to think of common things or things in your life that might pertain to those words to try to help you remember them. All right, so this coming week, we're going to have our first test. I'll have directions for the test coming up soon. And again, the test will be available from Thursday to Sunday. So it'll be available then, and then you can take it within that time. But once you start taking the test, you're committed, right? You're taking the test the whole way through. There's no stopping and coming back. There's no retaking the test. Also, where I am using Proctorio, and this is my first time doing this, so I have to, get up on it and then talk to you guys about it. And I think that's it. I wish you well. Please study, study, study. You could do this. Drill and kill, right? Practice, practice, practice. All right. See you another time.